Yo, check it. It's Jake Johnson on the mic, master of MMA in the funeral site. Flipping companies like it's right, so tight. Collector of cars from morning to night, from caskets to classics. His styles never masked, reviving industries, no questions asked. In the world of business, his strategies vast. Step into his world, as he says at last. Welcome to PodCasket.
But you mentioned staffing, so maybe this will be an interesting start. Do you think like that the advancement in like robotics and AI and stuff will be able to resolve that in our lifetimes?
Well, it's interesting. So I was in a forum study group meeting yesterday, not an industry one, but multiple industries within this group of 12, and one of them had just gotten back from an AI seminar, and the general consensus doesn't apply to every industry, I suppose, but the general consensus, if you haven't used AI at some level within your organization, your business is in jeopardy of going out of business in the next 5 years.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, it's just so incredibly convenient.
Well, and it's ever changing. I didn't realize there's a service within Google which is called Gemini. Apparently,
Yeah.
I've not used Gemini, but even Google is adopting changes in how they find things for you, or fine tune those by using AI. So it will be interesting to see how that impacts funeral service, which is always delayed in its progression with the times. But the next generation is. I think it's I'm very optimistic on the times, because you have the baby boomers and the generation before them that, God bless them, because they're my parents as well. My father passed away in December, but they're dying, and they're the largest segment of the population. So if from just a pure mathematics and customer base and being a business owner, you're confronted with a lot more customers in the future in the same market. And then on top of that, the new customers coming in are more open to like the AI and what Tukios does, what you guys do, whatever. So technology is like, really, I only wish I would have figured out a funding mechanism of it back in the day, because I think I was 24. Let's see. So I was 24, I think. And so I was working at Keystone Group as the first employee. And I'm saying to myself, so at that point, there was the director's assistant for Windows, TDAW as we called it. And then you had PC Anywhere, which you would use for remote controlling computers, which was a fascinating piece of software. Like you can actually remote into a computer. We're talking about like the 1996, 1997, somewhere around there. And so I'm thinking to myself, man, technology in this space, how cool it would be to be able to do this online. And I wonder what websites are going to be in the future. This is me saying this to myself in 1996, and I know I wasn't the only one, because you're never the only one. There's always somebody else thinking it. And look, from 1996 to today, 2024, how long has it taken for that to actually come to some type of being? And it's still not even what I was envisioning in 1997 or whatever time that was.
Mm-hmm.
6. So it's just such a slow adoption, So,
yeah.
But anyway, it's upon us, really.
Yeah. When you mentioned, rewinding right back to your first comment, sorry, because I think this is one that, it's not come up in a lot of our AI discussions, especially those of us that like present on AI in the space. But you mentioned Google Gemini and the way that it does generative search results, right? So we've all seen this. You search something and then the AI writes a result at the top. Well, right now, and let's hope that it stays this way, but there's really not much we can do about it. Right now, it's not going and generating a result for an obituary. But if like someone searches an obituary, if Google generates the result, like the generative AI will write the result and knows what you're looking for. They know you're going there and you're probably looking for like, when's the service time? Google's just going to try to deliver the result that the user is searching. And if they do that, well, now your website is literally just becoming a content source for Google, and you're
Right.
not getting the traffic anymore. And like, you'll see, like, it seems that seems to be cutting down like the how-to sites, maybe some of
Right.
the, like,
Yeah.
even like the recipes, like you search something and if the generative result gives you what you're looking for, why would you ever go to the page?
Right. Well, and I've always thought, the next thing that somebody was going to create was a way for basically giving you exactly what you're looking for instead of like hundreds, like all these. There's still, it's amazing the amount of homework Netscape back in the day, and now through Google today did for you. It's fascinating. But I always thought, what if there was this reverse lookup where, you were, people, it basically was just putting you directly in touch with exactly what you were looking for automatically,
Yeah.
and that's where they're heading. You're right.
Yeah. No, it'll figure us out a little bit more. I mean, it's creepy how much it's aware of what we're thinking before we search, right? I can't get over, we all know our phone's listening to us because of some app we downloaded, and then all of a sudden we're getting an ad because you and I just talked about whatever. But the ones that blow my mind is like, I don't even think I said that out loud.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure
no,
I just
agree.
thought that. That
Well,
freaks me out.
where you, like, for me, I've had that experience where I'm surfing for like a car part online, and it would be too detailed for me to even said it out loud. I'm just searching online, and somehow cross-referenced with my cell phone, like my cell phone starts producing these ads to me. I'm like, how in the heck yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so crazy.
They're all tied together, man.
Yeah. It's a little bit freaky, but
it makes you wonder. I mean, you think about funeral home of the future, or the funeral service of the future, or the offering of the future, and think of a funeral home and start with the real estate, and what is that? What should that really become? It seems to be proven out if you fully engage in it, which is very expensive, and how you create a reception type atmosphere rather than a funeral home that has a reception center, that it increases average sale. And then, so if you have that, then, there's always been funeral homes. I first saw them in Chicago, where you had various funeral directors that really had their own little businesses, and they operated out of a single funeral home in town that would lease them space. You just kind of wonder, based on the search algorithms for people as they go more online, who it points them to. Is it the facility or the provider? And then, are those both the same in the future, or what? I don't know. It's interesting.
No, that's a great point, because if you've got your back office facilities for prep and everything else, and the other thing I think about, like, if robotics does advance quick enough where we see it like solve staffing problems for funeral homes, where like a humanoid robot could do the embalming and do all the the removal and all that, like, I mean, it really does make it where one person could run a multiple thousand call business, right, with these and the thing is, it makes me wonder is like, how will we adopt that when people are like, well, we need the personal touch? I'm not saying we don't. I think we do. But the interesting thing is, it's like, how many of us prefer text messaging over a phone call? I mean, it's like,
it's amazing, the next generation. Where I'm learning it is in my cars. So my hobbies are golf and cars, and so I have cars, and I've got a very very good technician that works on my cars and wiring, whatever. He's a young guy, and he's absolutely fits the profile of what you see in employees. Like, he's good enough that he can work on his own, so he never wants to work for anybody. He comes and goes as he wants. He makes good money doing it because he's very good at it, and most of his communication is via text. And I have to train him. I'm like, can you please send it in an email? I have so many emails a day, I can't remember all this. And of course, then I see on the other side, and sometimes he'll miss something because it's all text to him. So whether this is a funeral home technology idea or not, somebody needs to come out with something where you solve that problem, because everybody just wants to use text instead of email. Anyway, but it's interesting.
Yeah, or it should all just morph into one thing, right? Where it's like, there's one method of communication regardless of what it is.
Yep, absolutely. And it's out there, right? Because we have SMS aftercare software we use, and it's you create the scripts and it will just, it progresses with the responses and the times you put in it. And it's all done on the computer. We're not using phones to text to these families. The computer software is doing it. So it seems natural,
Yeah. And the thing is too, like, we've seen a lot of companies, we're getting in the weeds here in this AI stuff, but like Klarna, it's like one of those afterpay services, right? Where like you can buy this thing for $100 or $25 for the next 4 months. They just, 2/3 of their staff, they just cut to like their answering service, their tech support. They turned over to AI agents, and the customer satisfaction and accuracy went up. It's like, I mean, that's all this stuff is going to change. I think some of those things are going to change in funeral service pretty soon. I think we'll see that happen pretty soon.
Well, you see, I've had a lot of, as I've gravitated into managing my parents' estate, there's a lot of like calls I need to make. And here's an interesting fact, so because funeral homes deal with this, you have to have the right people in front of you identified for the approvals of the cremation and the death certificate and things like that. And so when I'm calling these banks and financial institutions for my parents, they don't even want to answer the phone. Like they have this, the chat bots, and then it puts them to an agent. And what, quite frankly, is nice but kind of scary from a security standpoint is I'm able to get much further, not even as the owner of their accounts, posing as my mother to get these things done for my parents than if I have to call. So it's kind of an interesting thing. You know what I'm saying?
That's super interesting because let's say, I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking like, what do the agents, these AI, I mean, I'm wondering like if the AI agents in the future are going to be programmed also to like confirm, not just via question, but like even your voice. Because what if you're impersonating your mother and it's you and it's your voice, but it's an AI agent. It's like, it doesn't, like maybe it's not picking up gender or something like that. There's a lot of that that could be really,
because the good part is it can handle the function of the problem very well, but it doesn't know who it's handling it for. It'll just, so that's in it, and it'll solve it, right? Because we're already seeing like the voice recognition stuff. Well, it's already out there. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was, man, we could probably talk for hours about just random stuff, but we got to tell the history of death care here through the icons of the people that built it. And you're one of those. And so was your father, very much so. So, the purpose of PodCasket here is to do that. So let's shift gears, and we would like to hear your history. I mean, I'm sure if you just take it from the top, kind of like from when your dad got into funeral service and into the business and growing up in Batesville, all this stuff. And before you take off, though, I want to say thanks, and I want to say this publicly because I said this to you a few weeks ago, but I really mean this. It was really cool to be a part of an event that where your dad was honored, and I had this major realization that the industry as it is and all of the opportunities that we have, many of us, especially that have been in the space for maybe 15, 20 years, it wouldn't exist in the way it does if it weren't for people like Tom and his friends and the people that he brought into the business and into the profession and all that they did and to shape it and form it to where we are. And I think we all owe a great debt to them and to you and your family for all that's been done. And so I just wanted to say that so others could hear, because I think that we all should recognize that. So I'll lead off. It gives me a little
goosebumps to hear you say that. It's very nice of you to say that. Dad was always about relationships. This profession is first and foremost that. We're a close-knit group, right? And once you're in, it's hard to get out, right? You see people stick in it for their, well into retirement because of the relationships you build. So yeah, it was a great event. It was a great tribute. You guys did a great job with the tribute that you guys did. And so thank you for saying that. Yeah. And really the way it originated with Dad. So he's just you just run into people that are just, they just always seem to find a way to be successful. Dad was, went to Butler University as a basketball and baseball scholarship. So he finished baseball, played varsity all 4 years, and actually still has some home run records, even though he was a pitcher. So go figure.
Wow.
But anyway, after that, his dad was the mayor of And so Dad always thought he'd be in banking. When he and my mom got married and they met in Batesville, he decided to work for Fifth Third Bank out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and it was too slow for him, and he wanted to somehow get back to Batesville. So some of the little known things, my father's uncle and then a cousin of his are Hillenbrands, the Hillenbrand family. So he called one of his cousins or his cousin and Ray and asked for if they had a job at Batesville Casket. Dad came over. They did. Dad came over and he got sales trained, and then quickly progressed into heading up their sales training department, and then became in charge of their national accounts. And it's through their national accounts program that he was involved in that, and really through those early stages of life that he met people like Mike DeBeese and Bill Cutter and quite a few people that are icons themselves in the world, but in the funeral space. And so, but from that, he met funeral operators. IFS was a big consolidator with SCI back in the day, and Dad went to work for IFS and helped them out in pre-need sales, and then went to San Diego to run their large combo that they had, and then SCI bought them. And Dad thought he'd progress his career further at Batesville Casket, and it was a short stint, and decided to work at Pierce Brothers Mortuaries, where he got his success. And that was in turning around a company that was struggling and turning it into something that ended up getting sold to SCI. But Dad really ran it. Dad was given an opportunity by Mr. Albritton, who was the owner, who's since passed away, to just run it as he saw fit. And Dad ran it very, responsibly and like it was his, and created so much value that it got sold to SCI, and Dad was not an owner. So Mr. Albritton offered a generous bonus, but Dad promised himself he would not work for anybody else that hard unless it was himself. So Dad moved back to Batesville. But during that time, so my brother and sister and I are born in Ohio. Short time there. Really, we all grew up in Southern California. So I grew up in Agoura Hills, California. That's where I met my wife at an early age. It showed her how to drive, and here we are today. But so I grew up in Southern California. That's where Dad was working at Pierce Brothers. He started Prime Succession in Batesville, Indiana. I finished my first year of college at Santa Barbara City College. And then when he came back to Batesville to start Prime Succession, I went to Xavier University. And that was really good for me. And I finished school at Xavier with business administration, emphasis on accounting and finance. And so from 91 to 1996, early 96, I want to say, Dad acquired like 160 funeral homes or something like that. Wow. I mean, it was fast, rapid. And he had a health scare. Now, bear in mind, so when Dad went to run Pierce Brothers, I think he was 31 or 29 or something like that. And then when he sold Prime Succession, he was 47. So he started that company at 42, sold at 47.
Wow.
They did very well. He retired. I was working at Prime Succession when he sold the company. I had just finished Xavier University, so I was starting to do accounting there. I was interested in the mergers and acquisitions side. They stopped doing that. I kept working on accounting until the company was sold. My dad called me when I was on Christmas vacation and said, "You're fired, by the way." And he said, "We're selling the company." So luckily for me, Steve Tidwell, Bob Horn, Jim Price, Steve Schaefer, these four guys all decided to form Keystone Group, and I was given the opportunity to come aboard. I would have worked for free, and whatever they paid me is what when I compare it now, it wasn't much, but it was well worth it. I appreciated the opportunity, and I'm very fortunate. So that was in 1996. I moved to Tampa, Florida, and it's me, Steve Tidwell, Bob Horn, Jim Price, and Steve Schaefer. That is the company. Wow. And so I was answering phones. I was setting up the PC Anywhere, director's assistant, system networking. I was somewhat involved early on in the file server, but I quickly progressed beyond that. They had to outsource that. After doing the accounting and things like that, they moved me into quickly into financial analysis at Keystone. And so from 96, well, the whole time I was there, I was in corporate development, and 2 years into it, I mean, we grew very fast, and I became the head of corporate development at Keystone Group. And I think in 99 is when the industry really went through struggles with they were buying heavily overpriced, not hitting targets. The investors had never seen that. STI had never missed a quarter. Now, like, there's all these problems going on. So in 2000, there was no deals to be done. And I felt like I had gained the experience I was looking for the next challenge. So I went to work at Palm Mortuaries in Las Vegas. And I did something that was kind of interesting, so I'm here in Tampa. I'm at Ivory Tower. I'm the head of corporate development. I'm 27 years old or whatever I was. And I was probably 26. And so I head up to Las Vegas, and they didn't have a role for me. This is the first time I learned that, if you find somebody, and I didn't know what my value was. I just knew I wanted to work. But if you find somebody that you think can do some good for you, that's what Kenny Noss did. He didn't have a role for me, but I suppose to say he saw something in me. And so I went to work there and said, well, just put me anywhere and I'll figure it out from there. So I started doing funeral services and running limousines. And I'll never forget some of the families, they would look at me saying, and what's your background? And I would tell them, like, and are you going to do the limos forever? I'm like, no, but I'm here for you today. So I did that. And then I started, they immediately put me in charge of one of their small cemeteries they were developing, just to see if I could manage the grounds guys. There's 4 grounds guys, and they had some problems with the cemetery. And so I was successful at that. And they said, well, we really could use you doing arrangements. We're going to train you to do funeral arrangements. So they moved me to their largest. No, they didn't move me there. They trained me at their largest location, which is quite a large location. We have about 1,200 interments a year and about 1,400 cases, all in one location. So I learned to do funeral arrangements pretty quickly there. I think it was the first and last time I was ever handed a beeper. If anybody even knows what a beeper is anymore. And so if I ever got a 911 on my beeper, I knew I needed to call, and then there was a location that needed me to do funeral arrangements. So I was like a free-range funeral director. And so I was doing funeral arrangements, managing the cemetery, and then they lost one of their managers, one of their 800-call firms. So I started learning how to manage a funeral home. So I went in there, did funeral arrangements, managing funeral homes, still managing that other cemetery. And then after that, I had good success there. It was really, there were some issues there. They lost their head of cemetery operations and asked if I wanted to try that out. And I said, sure. So I went over to cemetery operations, did not include the sales part of it, but all the operations of all the cemeteries. So about 40 cemetery grounds people at 4 cemeteries. And the biggest problem they had was irrigation issues due to the desert and like antiquated irrigation systems. And so I actually fixed all that through Excel sheets and a lot of late hours, but I fixed the irrigation issues. And then they had, I put together, the next problem they were having is with the 5 locations in town, 6 locations. The customers thankfully didn't associate a difference between a Palm cemetery and a Palm funeral home. We were all one unit. So if somebody came into a funeral home on the north side of town and they had a problem with the east side of town cemetery, we weren't getting the customer service tickets handled in time correctly. So in my stint at Keystone Group, I learned how to program in Microsoft Access. And so at Palm, I developed a customer service database software, basically with it was basically a limited CRM software with a customer service panel for tickets. And since they had an intranet, I housed the database within their server downtown, and then installed an instance of Access at all the computers. And that way we managed all the tickets, and the grounds guys would come in, fill them out. Naturally, now you see this plenty of times, but you fill it out, show it completed. That way the funeral homes knew what the action was, and the dashboard only had what needed to be done. So I did all that. And the only thing left they really had for me in the third year, they put me on their executive board. And it was during that time my father out of retirement. So then now my father enters. And so he's doing consulting to the board. And that's just about the time Lowen Group goes bankrupt, and they take Dad's old company with them into bankruptcy. But it was also owned by Blackstone, who had also bought Rose Hills. And so Blackstone, if I have all the facts right, but ultimately what happened was investors approached the new prime succession and said, we'd like to buy you, and we'll pay this much, and let us deal with it from there. So they had a group approached my father and said, look, you know these businesses, how much are they worth? So there was one other consultant that looked at it, and based on the trust extraction that was done by Lowen, they basically valued the company at zero. Dad thought he could probably get them a number close to 100 million, actually. They said, well, that's a large difference, so if you think you can do it, go right ahead. And that's exactly what he did. So he went back to the owners. It was a hybrid structure where the investors kept the real estate for a year, I believe it was, and they sold the business. And that was the seed money for Johnson Consulting. So out of that, he started Johnson Consulting because of the cash he was bringing in from being successful at doing that. And once he had built up a big enough reserve, he called me, and it just happened to coincide with, well, it didn't coincide with anything. I was progressing at Palm, but I was kind of hitting a ceiling at Palm with, in the 4 years I'd been there. And so I started with Johnson Consulting in 2004. And it was just Dad and I working out of our offices. And we decided to, it might have been said in the tribute that we just did, but we decided to move to Phoenix, Arizona, where my dad had bought some funeral homes, and move my brother and sister. And so in 2005, I hired my first employee, which was my sister. And in 2006, we gained the business of SCI and liquidating all of their FTC mandated divestitures and non-accretive assets. And we grew rapidly from there. So you're really from 2005 to today, where we have over 40 employees and, multiple services. And so that's kind of the story of how we got where we're at, and now some technology assets and things that we do. So
that's incredible. Is there any like maybe like a philosophy or something that's just like stood the test of time from like when your dad started it, and maybe like the why or the purpose or the mission or something at the core of like when it got going that you guys still live by today?
Yeah, we have continued the tradition of what my dad did that created so much success, and that's the relationship part of this business. There's a business to be done, and there's some really non-touchy-feely parts of it. But at the end of the day, you want to know who you're doing business with, that you can trust them, especially when you're selling your most valuable asset, which is your family's business that you've had for years. And so that proved very well for Dad over his career, and it's proved well for Johnson Consulting. I mean, we're kind of the good guys, really. I mean, we're not going to let our name is our guarantee. You could say that we have a guarantee or your money back, but we just do it anyway. We didn't know there was any other way to operate. So yeah, that's how we've grown, really.
That's incredible. And what would you say like your proudest accomplishment in all that you've done? Like,
yeah, I mean, it was we've had lots of successes throughout the years, but I think the biggest thing that I always tell people is that you really need to be humble and use that more pointedly in how you learn. There's always the next generation, yourself, other people that I've met that I look up to and their experiences, that as long as I've been around here, there's always something new to learn. And, the moment you think you've learned it all, that's when you stop learning and you start failing. And so you couple that with what I would say is a vision of being a little uncomfortable. stretch goals is what they call them, but create a vision of where you want to be or a mission statement that it should sound ridiculous, quite frankly. And if you want to be an entrepreneur, it should really sound ridiculous. Like, I want to do this, this, and this, and you really kind of have to say it out loud, and you have to visualize that. And what great fortune you'll have, even if you get halfway there. Quite frankly. But without that vision of looking at things differently, of hearing counterpoints and trying to see, I always say, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. So how can you take something like the AI thing we're talking about? There's a lot of opportunity in that. It's also very frightening. Which side do you want to be on? When you're on the right side, you end up being like the Elon Musks of the world or the Curtis Funks of the world. I'll say it that way. But there's just a lot of opportunity out there, and have that drive. And the thing I've learned from that, then, especially as you get older, is be cognizant of balance, be understanding that it's probably not going to be there, but be cognizant of it. That you got your family, you got your health, especially as you get older. And so that you work to balance that, knowing that it will never truly be there. So don't get frustrated in the fact that you can't achieve it. But, if you're cognizant of that, you set the vision, be humble, listen to other people's opinions. And the last I would say is being organized. There's no way to think creatively and think strategically if you are not organized. You're mired down in too much stuff. You're just always distracted. It might be good stuff for you, but if, at some point, especially as you grow, if you can't find people to help carry that load, you will be stuck. That creativity that got you where you're at is going to die, or it's not, you won't be able to use it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us about your kind of the timeline when your dad stepped away, or did he actually ever really did he sort of pretend to step away and just stay involved? And
so my dad, we can all hope with children that we have a child to come in, take it over, that we can trust, and then we can still do what we want to do. So that's like I say, my dad's always found a way to be successful in what he wants to do. And I was the right timing for me. I came over. I was ready to conquer the free world. He was ready to still be involved, but he didn't want to get done with stuck with all the details of it. And so he has always been a good consigliere, I guess I'll call it, and sounding board. And especially when I was starting at Johnson Consulting, there's the gray hair effect of things, especially when you're dealing with mergers and acquisitions and millions, if not sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars. You could listen to somebody who's in their 30s, but you'd probably rather listen to Tom Johnson, right? So my father he knew how to get out of the way and let me do my job, and I knew when to get him involved to make sure things got done. And so as I developed, he slowed down because when he saw that he could. And I, quite frankly, I really took the reins and ran the company from the start. I just always had him as a good resource through the years. And then in the end, as I started coming in my own, he slowed down. I mean, really, I became the CEO of Johnson Consulting and the owner in 2010. And it's been that way ever since, So he always would tell me, he's like, look, if you don't, I'm here, let me know if you need anything, but I think you've got this. And I was always, I never had enough ego to say, I don't need my fun. If I needed him for something, I'd bring him in a pinch, and, it was a good team that way. So.
Yeah, for sure. You had to earn your own street cred, I'm sure there, but a year, just your dad passed, as you mentioned, in December. A year ago today, was that expected? Were you expecting that to happen?
It was, I knew he was starting to really suffer. But my father, so the other part of the key trait that I've learned from him is optimism. I mean, there was nothing he didn't think he could conquer, and that's part of that vision, of not seeing a way that this is going to, there's a roadblock. He would see the way he was going to plow through the roadblock, either go around it or just literally plow through it, So he handled that with his own health. Basically, I didn't see my father. I think as late as 2 weeks probably before he passed away. He was planning on when he's getting back to Arizona, and even though he was like in and out of hospitals constantly, so just a very optimistic person, somebody who really, something to really reflect on and how we view things in life, especially as funeral professionals. I mean, we see so much of what people go through. I have a funeral home. I've been there lately, but I'm sure somebody's having the worst day of their life today at my funeral home, much less the other 18,000 that are across the U.S. And so, it puts things in perspective as far as what's important or just how bad things are, right? So, yeah. Very helpful. Yeah, he was very good at that.
That's awesome, man. I'm bummed I didn't really get to know him better personally. But so back to the business here, like, when was there ever a moment from when you took the reins completely and where you just felt like, oh man, we are gonna, the ship's going down? Is there ever one of those moments where it was just like,
no, I mean, really stressful? Our progression over the years has been really great. I think as you see in the profession right now, as we come out of COVID and you have the high value expectations and some buyers that are pulling off a little from that, it's a wider range right now. But that's caused some delays in deals. And so, the biggest thing is I've always pushed my skis close to the edge all the time, and, every once in a while you got to pull back, but never to the detriment of the momentum that you have, because it's like a flywheel, right? It's hard to push that flywheel forward. Once it gets going, it's hard to stop. So, it's the biggest thing I've always learned is once that flywheel's going, just keep your powder dry, because you need it. You're just confronted with so many opportunities that you then need to develop the discipline of saying no more than yes. And so really, it's we've been good at that over the years. Right now we're looking at it and preparing ourselves for the next growth spurt. And it's painful when you do it, because what got you from when I started 400,000 of revenue to 2.5 million is not what got us to 5 million or 10 million. So it's a different organization. And to go from 10 million plus, you have to look at it even further, and you hope that you put. And this is not just John's Consulting. It could be Tukio's. It could be any funeral home, really. When you think of succession planning, how do you take what is you and the good parts of you, and there's bad parts of all of us, right? Is the good parts, and make that trainable, and your onboarding with your people, so that you can focus on what got you where you're at instead of getting stuck in the details. So, we continue to fine tune that, and, we'll spend money here and then pull back and deploy it over here, or build up our cash reserves again. So it's always been good. It's the part that will keep you up at night with just doing M&A deals is that you'll go 3 months and work really hard with a lot of staff expense and make literally $0. And then all of a sudden you have a huge month, and that counts for it. And then so there's these up and downs. So there's a real discipline of cash reserves and budgeting and 13-week cash flow analysis, as they call it. That's a very important thing as well.
Mm-hmm. You make a good point on the, just the ability to scale a business and trying to scale what's good about you. And it's also a challenge because, as an entrepreneur, like, what you're good at. And if it's something you can train, it also makes it kind of hard to let it go, because it's like, that's your baby. Like, that's what you're good at. You're a product guy, or you're a sales and marketing guy, or whatever it is.
That's where you learn about what they always tell you, and that's finding good people, right? Finding really good people. And in my experience, any good person I've found, I've never felt like I overpaid them. You know what I mean? They're well worth their weight in gold, and it's just finding those people, and then having those processes so that you're involved in the right things. That's for sure. Yeah.
So tell us all the things that Johnson Consulting does now.
Yeah. So we started out as a M&A firm, and at the core, that's what we are. So, we have a high market share doing mergers and acquisitions, helping people buy and sell funeral businesses across the U.S. and Canada. We've dabbled in Mexico even in the past. Then also because of the large amount of comps that we have, our valuations are very relevant and have a lot of support to them. So we have a large appraisal valuation service division, if you will. And then from there, because of the resources I had available out of Dad's company that he built, and how do you manage 160 funeral homes when you're located in Batesville, Indiana? And so you had to have appropriate accounting systems, which we then adopted at Keystone Group, and then it has evolved since then. But appropriate accounting systems, how do you monitor what the customers are saying, not just what the financials are saying, and then how do you manage the location staff when there's no longer an active owner? So I've been afforded the opportunity, the resources through my dad's contacts over the years to have people that are experts in those various areas, either regional vice presidents that are even still licensed funeral directors themselves, or experienced accountants, understanding funeral organizations, the nuances of that, and along with just the survey experience. My first brush with it was through Paul Mortuary and conducting surveys and tying that to incentive compensation plans. So to summarize it, we have mergers and acquisitions and valuations. Then we have this whole business process outsourcing division, or the business, back office support, where we're doing accounting, coaching, virtual CEO services. So I'll explain that, and then finding out what the customer is saying through our customer surveying. The customer surveying, we're about up to, I think it's about 1.9 million in sales records. 1.9 million records of sales, along with hundreds of thousands of survey results, and finding out what customers want, don't like, what's the value of the service, and how does that correlate to the different case types and the different size markets and things like that. And so you couple that with industry specific chart of accounts, along with I call them RVPs, or regional vice president guys, who are now business consultants doing virtual COOing, if you will. It's pretty powerful. I use my funeral home as an example, Menke Funeral Home in Sun City. I don't visit Menke Funeral Home much. I mean, it's not, I'm the entrepreneur, so I'll come up with creative ideas, but I have a great manager there. And then quite frankly, I use Johnson Consulting's COO services, where I don't have to be involved. It's basically, we call it a virtual COO. So a business consultant meets weekly with my manager. They review customer service results. They monitor the cash flow and the 13-week projections, along with making sure that everything's being reconciled. And then I get a summary every week, and I don't have to be involved. So that's pretty nice from a balance standpoint. It allows me to, as an entrepreneur, engage in many activities at one time. So mergers and acquisitions, business process outsourcing, that you add all that together, that is Johnson Consulting.
That's amazing. I got a couple thoughts about this. One is, when people say there's no overnight success, and I'm a believer of that. And if you look at that, what's really cool about what you did there, or what you've built, is it's like you mentioned, it's things that came out of Batesville and Keystone and Palm, right? It's things that you've done, that you had tons of experience with, that you knew would work. It solved problems that you solved in previous companies, and then you were able to scale and replicate that for others and provide it as a service to others. I think that's amazing. It's, so many people think I need to come up with a good business idea. And it's like, well, no, at the end of the day, you got to solve a problem.
Right.
And find a customer that's willing to pay for that solution.
Mm-hmm.
And you had decades of experience with these solutions that were for your customers. That's awesome. It's
interesting because really what we are at the end of the day, so we help people buy and sell businesses, and we're very good at it. But at the end of the day, we're a ivory tower for funeral homes, if you will. And while I have one, most of the funeral homes that we're doing that for are just our customers, helping them run them better. And what's cool about it is, because there is a multiple applied to your cash flow. When you can enhance cash flow even by $20,000, you're adding $100,000 to $200,000 in equity value at an organization. So when you compare that to what it costs, it's a no-brainer. It really is a no-brainer, quite frankly.
Yeah. Do you ever have anyone come to you and say, like, I want to buy funeral homes and do kind of what you're doing? Like, I want to buy funeral homes, but have you guys like kind of remotely run operations and train and
yep. We have a couple customers that have figured that out, and good for them. It's because basically, I mean, they dabble with what they want to as entrepreneurs, and we handle the rest. Yep.
Yeah. That's a brilliant idea. All right. Well, this is awesome. Let me ask a couple personal questions. So hobbies, you mentioned golf. I don't think there's, we both love to golf, but tell us about your car hobby. I think that's interesting here.
So it really spawned from growing up in Southern California, where it was easy to run into nice cars because we lived inland from Malibu Beach and whatever. So my first car was a 91 Mustang GT. So this will age me. So that was my senior year in high school. So I got a 91 Mustang GT, brand new. I think my father wanted to buy me something a little more practical than that, and I promised him I would take care of it, and I still have it, actually. So it's from that, I really got into the performance of cars. I would do, this is before Fast and Furious, whatever, but I would go to street races, and I just kind of learned the car culture way back in the, like, 1989, 90, whatever. And so, I was shown these cars that are now very valuable and popular by our generation. So during COVID, among other things, people started collecting cars, and that's where I got into it. So I had wanted a newer Mustang. I had not bought another car that was a sports car from 1991 until 2020, actually.
Wow.
And so I bought a 2020 Mustang, and then it got out of control after that. So, but I kind of had this thing where, well, I can invest here, I can do that, whatever. And so I've always put myself in a position where I have that flexibility. But yeah, so now I've got 19 collectible cars, and wow. The other thing that I started enjoying was like the JDM type of cars. So I always found it fascinating, these Nissan Skylines, and so I now have 4 of them. So I've got they go by series numbers. So I have a 32, 2 33s, a 34, and then Mazda RX-7 Veilside. Just cool looking cars that, they're ridiculously changed in their value. Like these are cars that weren't supposed to be 100 and whatever thousand. Now they're just very valuable cars, and they're very collectible. So I tried to buy cars that were collectible and would endure, the next generation. Because if you follow the car hobby, as soon as that generation starts retiring, or, they don't want to own the cars that they grew up with, the car values go down. So I'm all into the cars that are early 90s and things like it, which ended up being a great year for creating sports cars, affordable sports cars. Yeah.
That's super cool. Well, you got a few more you got to tell us about things. You got 4 Skylines, it sounds like, and the RX-7 and the Mustangs. What else?
Yeah,
what else is in that collection?
So 300ZX, still in the 300ZX, it's called. NSX, which is a cool car. The NA2 2005 NSX, which is their last year, very rare year. E60 Dynan M5, that's just a powerful, like, 4-door sedan. And then a bunch of Mustangs. So two GT500s, a GT350R, and those 3 are Shelbys, and they're rare in their own sense, very collectible cars. And then the rarest are my Mustang Cobra Rs, they're called. So 2000R, 95R, and a 1993R. And I'm discerning about it, so I only wanted to buy a very unchanged one. So they're low mileage, like my 93 Cobra R is 2,200 miles, and so it's one more. Yeah, very, very expensive, these cars. So then they keep going up in value. So it's kind of like a diversified asset portfolio. That's
seriously,
right? So
that's a good. It's probably a great place to store value, right? I
mean, it's changed a little lately, but there's not. I didn't buy them as a short-term, investment solution. So something to have fun with. That if I sell down the road, I'll get the same amount or more, and I'll get some years of enjoyment out of it. It's kind of what you hope for. Yeah.
Do you drive them very often?
Yeah, I'll drive usually one a weekend, just kind of rotate them. The worst thing you can do to a car, by the way, is let it sit. for a long period of time. And when I
Yeah.
mean long period of time, like if you don't drive or start a car every 6 weeks, 8 weeks at the most, you're really starting to hurt it. Actually, the seals, it depends on the oil and the heat to kind of keep it where it's at. So yeah, go figure.
So where do you keep them? I mean, did you find a
Yeah.
hangar or a warehouse
So
or
we've
something?
got a warehouse. So yeah. So as Johnson Consulting has become a virtual office, my office is now within a warehouse that has where all these cars are stored. So yeah,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah,
That's so
it's
cool.
fun.
Yeah. All right. No, thanks for sharing that. I think that's super interesting. So one more question for you though is, and maybe you had a second to think about this since I sent it to you this morning. Sorry, is um, is there something you can tell us about you that would be surprising, that would surprise us?
Let's see, what would that be? I throw people off when I tell them I played a lot of years of music. So from middle school, high school, and part of college, I played trumpet. I can still play it. And in Southern California, because of you have the movie business, right? And you've got the music business. So our high school was still has a very high music program. I think I can't remember some of the rock bands, literally some of the rock bands we all know that some of the band as members have come from my high school. But
Wow.
so my high school was it was a very fortunate place to grow up. For those of my generation, Ricky Schroeder was like this actor or whatever. So he would come to our high school, and he was on the wrestling team of opposing high school. Various actors that were in movies that went to our high school, and then I can never remember her name. She's in my yearbook, but she was a real famous actor that was in, of all movies, the one I remember is Boogie Nights. She was in Boogie Nights. She was Roller Girl in Boogie Nights. Anyway, she went to our high school. I remember seeing her because I was in music, and they had the plays and things going on. So my thing is music, and I still very much enjoy it. Yeah. So
That's cool.
I don't play it because you really got to keep up with. Of course, I got a blower behind me if you can hear it, but if you don't play the trumpet for a while, you got to retune your chops. So but it's I still have connections with that. Some people that have gone on the late night, some of the late night shows and played in music, and then just various people, in an area of Southern California where you didn't realize all these people were going to be who they were when they grew up. So that was kind of a fun part of my life. So
yeah, that's way cool. So now I'm picturing, like, if you're out ripping around in one of your sweet sports cars, is there any like music that you just like to jam to when you're driving around?
So my music, because of my appreciation for it, is very broad and odd at the same time. There really isn't. I've been challenged with this, and there's really no music I don't like. And I from the bizarre to very, whatever, eclectic, or, Bob Marley was a big thing, growing up in Southern California, and then Metallica for me. And then in those times in Southern California, like NWA and rap was huge. So like that was a big thing. Eazy-E from he lived in our around our community. So these are
wow.
it's just a bizarre place to grow up, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But I think from that, quite frankly, it was kind of where you saw that there were endless possibilities if you just put your mind to it, Because I met lots of people, and fortunately through my father, early introductions with very successful individuals that, they're not terrifying people. The good ones, especially the successful ones, always have an open arm and willing to share with you how they were successful, and it helped me with a sense of confidence to approach people like that and not be afraid to ask them and dream big, So yeah.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, your story is awesome, Jake. You're an icon. Your father is an icon. And again, we just appreciate all that you guys have done to give back and also just shape the profession of what it is today.
I don't know about Icon, but I know the experience has been fun, and I'm always learning, and so I appreciate you saying that. But I appreciate also getting to know you better. I mean, I think you have a lot of these qualities that I've mentioned. You know that um, you're willing to pick up the phone, talk to people. You're approachable. You want people to be able to approach you, and especially if they have a differing opinion. Otherwise, you'll never. Everybody around you is just telling you what you want to hear, right? So. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that, respect that about you.
Oh, thank you. And I'm just grateful I stumbled into this industry. It's been awesome. Great people. But yeah, again, thanks for sharing your
Agreed.
story. And yeah, just appreciate it a ton. So thanks a lot, Jake.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna hit